Right now in the United States, honest gardeners are getting hit with huge fines and forced to rip out their fruit trees, not for drugs, not for anything criminal, just for growing the wrong fruit in their own backyard. If you grow fruit now or you ever plan to, you need to hear this. There are 9 fruits that can quietly turn a normal garden into a legal problem, a financial nightmare, or even a health emergency. People think, if the nursery sells it, it must be safe. If it's natural, the government doesn't care. That used to be true. Today, some of the worst cases start in small, quiet yards owned by people who thought they were following the rules. Before we dive in, hit subscribe so you don't miss any of these hidden gardening warnings. Most gardeners in the USA, Canada, and the UK share the same belief. If a plant is beautiful, if it grows well, and if a store is willing to sell it, then it must be safe to have at home. It feels like common sense. Sadly, that idea is now badly out of date. Modern agriculture law and invasive species rules do not care how innocent your garden looks. What matters is what that plant can carry, how it spreads, and what it can do to neighbors, farms, forests, and even your own health. That's why some completely normal-looking fruits are on state do not plant lists or are tightly restricted in certain regions and zones. In this video, you're going to learn about 9 risky fruits. Some can damage your kidneys, some can help destroy wheat or citrus crops, and some can turn a peaceful forest into a green dead zone. If you want to protect your plants, your wallet, and your peace of mind, make sure you're subscribed before we move on. Illegal fruit number 1, Manchineel, the little apple of death. This fruit looks like a small green crabapple and often grows along tropical beaches in places like southern Florida, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. From a distance, it seems harmless, even inviting. The fruit smells sweet, the tree gives shade, and to an untrained eye, it just looks like another coastal plant. That is exactly what makes it so dangerous for tourists and for gardeners who like to collect rare tropicals. Manchineel is considered one of the most dangerous trees in the world. A single bite of the fruit can cause severe burning in the mouth and throat, serious swelling, internal damage, and in extreme cases can be life-threatening. But the danger does not stop with eating the fruit. The sap is highly toxic too. Standing under the tree in the rain can cause painful skin blisters as the sap washes down. Touching the bark can burn your skin. Even burning the wood releases smoke that can damage your eyes and lungs. Because of all this, local authorities in parts of the Caribbean and coastal areas mark Manchineel trees with warning signs and paint. People are told never to shelter under them, never to touch the fruit, and never to burn the wood. This is not the kind of exotic you want in any private garden. If you ever see a tree on a tropical beach with small green apples and warning signs or painted trunks, stay away and warn your family as well. Illegal fruit 2, Starfruit, carambola, the kidney trap. Starfruit, also called carambola, looks completely harmless. When you slice it, the cross-section is a perfect star shape. It has a bright yellow color and a sweet tart taste. You see it in hotel buffets, fruit salads, and fancy drinks. Many gardeners in warm parts of Florida, Texas, and Hawaii like the idea of growing their own starfruit tree at home. On the surface, it seems like a fun, tropical upgrade to an ordinary backyard. The hidden risk is a compound in starfruit that acts like a toxin for people with weak or damaged kidneys. Healthy kidneys can normally filter this compound out of the blood. But if someone has chronic kidney disease, even early stages they may not know about yet, the toxin can build up. Symptoms often start with something small, like stubborn hiccups that will not stop. Then it can move to confusion, muscle weakness, seizures, and in severe cases, it can be fatal. Older adults and people with diabetes, high blood pressure, or a history of kidney problems are especially at risk. In some parts of the United States, certain starfruit varieties are restricted, not only for health reasons, but also because the trees can host citrus diseases that threaten orange and grapefruit groves. For gardeners, the key point is this: just because a fruit is sold in stores does not mean it is safe for everyone as a backyard snack. If you or your family members have kidney issues, starfruit should be treated with extreme caution. A beautiful yellow fruit is not worth a trip to the emergency room. Illegal Fruit 3. Common Barberry, the wheat killer berry. Common barberry is a shrub with sharp spines and bright red berries that hang in clusters. For a long time, people used these berries in jams and jellies, and some older gardens in the northern United States and parts of Canada still have barberry hedges that were planted generations ago. To many homeowners, it just looks like an old-fashioned, tough ornamental plant that birds enjoy. The real problem is what barberry can carry. This shrub acts as an alternate host for wheat stem rust, a serious fungal disease that attacks wheat fields. The fungus can move between barberry and wheat, using the shrub to survive and spread. When wheat gets infected, yields can drop dramatically, sometimes by more than half. That kind of loss does not just hurt one farmer, it can affect food prices, exports, and the wider economy. Because of this, several major wheat-growing states in the U.S. have strict rules or long-standing bans on common barberry. In the early and mid-1900s, government programs in wheat states searched and destroyed millions of barberry shrubs. Inspectors went farm to farm, including private yards, because one ornamental hedge could support the fungus that would then blow into nearby wheat fields. Today, many of those rules are still in place. To make things more confusing, garden centers sometimes sell other barberry species that look similar, so homeowners may not even realize they have the risky kind. If you live in a wheat-producing region in the northern U.S. or Canada and you see an old, spiny shrub with bright red berries, it's worth checking your local guidance before you let it stay. Removing a few bushes is far cheaper than being forced to clear an entire hedge under a state order. If you want to protect your garden and also avoid helping to spread diseases that threaten staple crops, hit subscribe now so you catch every fruit on this list. Illegal Fruit 4. Trifoliate orange, the silent citrus carrier. Trifoliate orange looks like a tiny, wild version of an orange tree. The fruits are small, round, and yellow-orange when ripe. They smell citrusy, but the taste is extremely sour and bitter, so most people never eat them for pleasure. In older rural areas of the American South, you can still find these shrubs and small trees along fence lines, driveways, and old homesteads. Some were planted as living fences because the branches are covered in long, hard thorns. To an untrained eye, it might just look like a tough, scrubby citrus. The real danger is not the taste. The danger is disease. Trifoliate orange can host serious citrus diseases while showing little or no obvious damage itself. That means it can quietly harbor pathogens that then spread into commercial orange, grapefruit, lemon, and lime orchards in states like Florida, Texas, and parts of California. Citrus is a huge industry in the United States, and many local jobs and businesses depend on those groves staying healthy. A handful of neglected trifoliate oranges on private land can become bridges for disease to move into valuable orchards. There is a second problem for landowners: the thorns. These are not small, polite prickles. They are long, sharp spines that can rip clothing, injure livestock, and puncture tractor and ATV tires. Once trifoliate orange is established in a pasture or hedgerow, it becomes very expensive to remove, especially on rough or hilly land. That is why many agricultural advisors in citrus states strongly recommend removing these trees and not allowing them to spread. If you live in USDA zones 7 to 9 in the southern United States and notice a wild, thorny mini orange along your property line, do not assume it is harmless. Check your state citrus guidelines and talk to your local extension office before you decide to keep it. What looks like a free citrus tree might actually be an uninvited risk to an entire regional industry. Illegal fruit 5. Callery pear. Often sold under names like Bradford pear and other ornamental varieties, once had a perfect reputation. Cities and suburbs across the United States planted them along streets, in parking lots, and in front yards. In early spring, they explode into clouds of white blossoms, and their small, round fruits are mostly ignored by humans but loved by birds. For decades, people were told these trees were ideal, fast-growing, disease-resistant, and tidy. The problem is what happened after those first plantings matured. The original ornamental forms were usually planted as clones, but over time, different varieties cross-pollinated. The next generations produced fertile seeds. Birds ate the small pears and spread the seeds into fields, roadsides, and forest edges. The wild offspring are not the neat street trees you see in old photographs. They are thorny, aggressive trees that form dense thickets. These thickets crowd out native trees and shrubs, especially in states like Ohio, Pennsylvania, and across much of the Midwest and Southeast. Farmers and landowners soon discovered a very practical problem. The thorns on wild Callery pear can puncture tractor and equipment tires. That means expensive repairs, lost work time, and in some cases, entire sections of land that become difficult to manage. At the same time, ecologists notice that areas taken over by Callery pear lose much of their native plant diversity. What started as a perfect ornamental became a weed tree that state agencies now spend millions trying to control. In response, several states have moved to restrict or ban the sale and planting of Callery pear. Some offer bounty programs to encourage removal. Yet many neighborhoods across USDA zones 5 to 9 still have mature trees that were planted before these rules came in. For a homeowner, this can feel like a betrayal. The same type of tree that was once promoted is now labeled a problem. If you have a white flowering pear tree that looks messy in fall, has poor-tasting marble-sized fruit, and you live east of the Rocky Mountains, it is worth checking if it is a Callery pear. Replacing it with a native or non-invasive flowering tree can save you future headaches and help your local environment at the same time. Illegal fruit 6. Autumn olive, the healthy berry that takes over everything. Autumn olive is a shrub that many older gardeners and land managers remember being praised as a wonder plant. It has silvery leaves, fragrant flowers, and produces small red berries that some people describe as tasting like a mix between cranberry and pomegranate. The berries are rich in antioxidants, and you can still find articles and videos talking about them as a superfood for foragers. In the mid-20th century, it was widely planted for wildlife habitat and erosion control, especially in the Midwest and Northeast. The dark side of autumn olive is its unbelievable reproduction rate. A single mature shrub can produce tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of berries in one season. Birds eat the berries and spread the seeds far and wide. Within a few years, fields, hillsides, and forest edges can be carpeted with young autumn olive plants. The shrubs grow quickly, outcompeting native bushes and small trees for light and space. Areas that used to host a mix of native species instead become solid stands of autumn olive. There is an even deeper problem that many people are never told. Autumn olive can fix nitrogen in the soil. That means it pulls nitrogen from the air and adds it to the ground, similar to some legumes. This sounds good at first, but in natural ecosystems that evolved with low to moderate nitrogen levels, this can completely change the soil conditions. Native plants that are adapted to leaner soils struggle to survive, while autumn olive and other aggressive species thrive. Over time, this shifts the entire plant community in favor of invaders and weeds. Because of its spread and its impact on ecosystems, several states, including places like Connecticut and Wisconsin, have officially listed autumn olive as an invasive or prohibited plant. Landowners may be required or strongly urged to remove it, and nurseries in those states are not allowed to sell it. Yet older plantings and volunteer seedlings are still easy to find in USDA zones 4 to 8. A bird can bring the seeds into your yard even if you never plant it yourself. If you see a shrub with silvery leaves and speckled red berries popping up in unmowed parts of your land, do not assume it is a free, healthy snack. Look up your state's invasive species list and consider removing it before it matures and spreads further. The earlier you act, the cheaper and easier it is. If you appreciate honest talk about plants that were once praised and are now causing real damage, make sure you are subscribed before we move on to the next fruit. Illegal Fruit 7. Russian Olive, the water thief of the West. Russian olive is a small tree or large shrub with narrow, silvery leaves and small olive-shaped fruits that birds enjoy. At first glance, it looks attractive, almost like a decorative tree you might see along a driveway or near a pond. For years, it was planted across parts of the western United States as a windbreak and as a supposedly tough, drought-tolerant tree. Many landowners liked it because it seemed to survive where other trees failed. The problem is what Russian olive does once it gets near water. Along rivers, streams, and irrigation ditches in states like Colorado, Wyoming, Utah, and New Mexico, Russian olive spreads quickly and forms thick stands. It grows in dense clumps that are hard to walk through and hard to remove. But the biggest concern is water use. Russian olive can use significantly more water than native trees like willows and cottonwoods. In dry western climates where every gallon of water is precious, that extra use adds up. Streams that once flowed year-round can slow to a trickle as Russian olive takes over the banks. Russian olive also changes the soil and shade patterns along rivers, squeezing out native plants that local wildlife depends on. Once a stretch of riverbank is dominated by this tree, it becomes much more difficult to restore natural habitat. Removing mature Russian olives is expensive. The trees have deep roots and can sprout back if not handled correctly. For ranchers and farmers who rely on reliable stream flow and irrigation canals, seeing Russian olive spread is like watching their water supply being stolen tree by tree. That is why many Western states now list Russian olive as a problem species and actively work to control it. In some areas, landowners may be required or strongly encouraged to remove it, especially near waterways. If you live in the western U.S., especially in USDA zones 4 to 7, and see a silvery tree taking over your creek bank, it is wise to check your state's guidance before you let it stay. Native trees can provide shade and wildlife value without quietly draining your local water source. Illegal Fruit 8. Buckthorn, the green wall that poisons the forest. Buckthorn is another plant that looks simple and harmless at first. It is a shrub or small tree with glossy dark green leaves and small black berries that hang on into winter. In older neighborhoods and rural areas in the northern United States and parts of Canada, it may appear in hedges, along fence lines, or at the edge of woods. Many people assume it is just one more wild shrub that birds like. Unfortunately, buckthorn does far more harm than most people realize. The berries of buckthorn act like a powerful laxative for birds. Birds eat them, the seeds pass quickly through their systems, and those seeds are dropped all over the landscape. That might sound good for spreading the plant, but it is terrible for native forests. Buckthorn leafs out earlier in spring than most native shrubs and trees and stays green later into autumn. This gives it a longer growing season so it can grab sunlight before other plants wake up and after they shut down. Over time, buckthorn fills the understory of forests, crowding out wildflowers, young oaks, maples, and other native trees. What makes buckthorn even more dangerous is what it does in the soil. It releases chemicals through its roots and leaf litter that make it harder for other plants to grow. This chemical warfare allows buckthorn to form nearly pure thickets under the tree canopy. From a distance, a buckthorn-invaded forest looks lush and green. Up close, you see that almost nothing grows under or between the shrubs except more buckthorn. This means fewer native insects, fewer nesting spots and food sources for songbirds, and a big drop in biodiversity. Because of these impacts, states like Minnesota, Wisconsin, and others in the upper Midwest have declared buckthorn a restricted or prohibited invasive plant. Landowners are encouraged or required to remove it when possible. The work is not easy. Cutting it back without treating the stumps often leads to re-sprouting. Seedlings keep coming up from the soil for years, but the earlier you catch it, the better. If you live in USDA zones 3 to 6 and see a forest edge or fence line turning into a solid wall of dark green shrubs with black berries, do not ignore it. Check whether it is buckthorn and look into safe removal methods. Stopping buckthorn now protects not just your property, but the health of nearby woods. Illegal fruit 9. Privet, the respectable hedge that ate the South. Privet is the classic, nice hedge plant many people grew up with. It has small, glossy leaves, white fragrant flowers in late spring, and clusters of small dark berries in fall and winter. For decades, privet hedges lined driveways, churchyards, school grounds, and suburban neighborhoods across the eastern and southern United States. If you grew up before the 1990s, you probably walked past privet thousands of times without a second thought. It was considered the standard of a proper, well-kept yard. The trouble is what privet does once it escapes those neat clipped borders. Birds eat the berries and drop the seeds into nearby woods, fields, and along creeks. In places like Georgia, Tennessee, North Carolina, and much of the Southeast, privet has invaded millions of acres of forest and bottomland. Once it takes hold, it forms dense, shadowy thickets under the taller trees. Very little light reaches the forest floor. Native shrubs, wildflowers, and young trees struggle to survive. Over time, the understory becomes almost pure privet. This change has big consequences for wildlife. Many native insects cannot feed on privet leaves, so their numbers drop. With fewer insects, there is less food for songbirds. Studies have found that forests invaded by privet can support far fewer native bird species than healthy, diverse forests. What looks like just a green hedge plant is actually helping to empty out entire food chains. On top of that, privet thickets can make land harder to access and manage, lowering property value and increasing fire risk in some areas. Because of this, several southern states now classify privet as a serious invasive plant and strongly discourage or restrict its planting. Older hedges remain in many neighborhoods, but more and more landowners are choosing to remove them and replace them with native or non-invasive species. For an older homeowner, this can be an emotional decision. That hedge might have been planted by parents or grandparents. It may feel like part of the home's identity, but keeping it means constantly feeding a seed source that will keep invading nearby woods and creek banks. If you are in USDA zones 6 to 9 in the eastern or southern U.S. and you have an old formal hedge with small leaves and dark berries, there's a good chance it's privet. Removing it over time and replacing it with native shrubs will not only protect the value of your property, but also help rebuild healthier local ecosystems. If you appreciate hearing the full story behind plants that older advice still calls perfect hedges, make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss future deep dives like this. You have just heard about 9 fruits that come with hidden costs. Plants that can poison people, carry devastating crop diseases, drain western rivers, and turn healthy forests into green dead zones. None of them look like trouble when you first see them. Most of them were actually promoted in past decades as clever, tough, or even eco-friendly choices. That is why so many normal, honest gardeners get caught by surprise. They are being punished today for plant decisions made by governments, nurseries, or previous owners years ago. The good news is that you are now far ahead of the average homeowner. You know that before you plant a fruit tree or a shrub that carries berries, you should ask 3 simple questions. First, could this fruit hurt someone in my family, especially children, older relatives, or anyone with health problems? Second, does this plant appear on my state or province's list of invasive or prohibited species, especially if I live in a wheat, citrus, or forested region? Third, does this plant have a reputation for spreading aggressively into wild areas? If the answer to any of these is yes or I don't know, it is worth taking a pause and doing a little research before you dig that hole. Your garden should be the safest and most peaceful place in your life, not a source of surprise fines, angry letters, or expensive removal orders. A quick check now can save you thousands of dollars in the future. It can also protect your neighbors, local farmers, and the wildlife around you. The best part is that for every risky plant, there are usually safer alternatives: native fruit trees, non-invasive hedges, and ornamentals that give you beauty and harvests without putting a target on your property.